बढ़ते हैं अपने अगले वक्तव्य की ओर। न मंजिलों के लिए न रास्तों के ही लिए मेरा ये सफ़र है, खुद से खुद की पहचान के लिए। भारत सदियों से विश्व में मानव जाति के लिए प्रेरणा का केंद्र रहा है। भारतवर्ष उपासना की भूमि है, पंथों की भूमि है, सभ्यता का पालना है। यह बात सोचने योग्य है कि सप्त सिंधु भारतवर्ष से बड़े पैमाने पर जब पलायन हुआ, उसी के कारण विभिन्न सभ्यताओं का विकास हुआ। When our ancestors first became fully human, they were already migratory, moving about in pursuit of the big game. So, हमारे अगले माननीय वक्ता जो हैं डॉक्टर तिलक रंजन बेरा, वे इसी विषय माइग्रेशन एंड रिवर्स माइग्रेशन पर अपना विचार रखेंगे। और इट इज़ माय प्लेजर टू रिक्वेस्ट डॉक्टर सुब्रतो गंगोपाध्याय टू काइंडली introduce to us our distinguished speaker.
Thank you, and I'll make this very brief so that we can remain on track. It was a pleasant surprise to me that one from my own alma mater has been doing very original and fascinating work. And Dr. Tilak Ranjan Bera is a physician, and as a matter of fact, is an ophthalmic surgeon who's done his MS in ophthalmology, and he served the country first as a Navy officer and as a Navy commander, and during his postings in various places, he began to look for symbolisms and began to unravel a tale of migrations. And interestingly, he has been migrating along the same routes repetitively to discover these routes of migration and connecting them through multidisciplinary researches, including those of genetics and those of symbolisms and semiotics, etc. And he's just published he's published numerous books, initially as travel books, but now he has published a fairly large and comprehensive book on India in Egypt. And several more are in the making, and I would not steal those titles and reveal them here. And it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Tilak Bera and tell us about his travels and what he finds in those travels that connects us to the world, and particularly migrations from the eastern part and the Bengal-Myanmar coast, etc. And I'll let him unravel that. And here's a warm welcome to Tilak. He's just returned from Jordan and Israel, where he was collecting evidences. So he was communicating from there. I'm glad you made it back in time to tell us what you found. Well, welcome.
नमस्कार। सभी गुरुजनों की अनुमति और आशीर्वाद के साथ हम अपना वक्त शुरू करने जा रहे हैं। You have to excuse me because I'll be talking in English, because what we are trying to convey, we have to convince the Western world in the language they understand. Thank you, Suprataji, for your kind words. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this conference and sparing your valuable time. At the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference for giving me this platform to discuss about the pre-recorded period of India. In fact, I am going to particularly concentrate on onward and reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities. Incidentally, this conference is being held in an IIT campus. I would like to express a small anecdote. I had an association with IIT Kharagpur because I managed to crack the All India IIT entrance and got admitted there for my engineering course. But eventually, as the luck would have it, I left IIT Kharagpur and joined Medical College Calcutta, or now Kolkata. Probably my medical degree has provided me a lot of confidence about dealing with genetics. At this period, in 2022, when we arrange a migration path, we have to keep in mind the available genetic data, because otherwise it will not be accepted all over the world. Now let me come to the topic of the day straight away. Very recently, I have authored a book titled India in Egypt. As the name suggests, it is all about an intense connectivity between the Indian civilization and the Egyptian civilization. In fact, I'm making an attempt to establish that the Egyptian civilization was established by the Indian origin people. As Mr. Vedvir Arya has also mentioned about a connectivity or the antiquity of those civilizations also predates the present way of thinking, what we think. So this is, however, if this is the concept that in Egyptians, that is not a very acceptable context at this juncture, because in the meantime, what we have been taught in our academic curriculum does not encourage such a line of thinking. But we have to also keep in mind what we have been taught may not be correct in every sense. Now, we are not very sure about the antiquity of Indian civilization at this juncture, because we consider that Indian civilization is one of the oldest, maybe the oldest, but I feel that we have to arrange the available ground evidences to arrange the pre-recorded period of India. And for that, we have to incorporate latest data, especially of genetics and archaeology, to arrange that pre-recorded period. And I have compiled information from all possible scientific sources, but at the same time, I had to include what is there in Rig Veda also to arrange my narrative, because all these are sources from which we have to take information and arrange them in the same narrative. And when we compile all these latest data and consider them in tandem, we find a completely new picture of the pre-recorded period of India. It took me 20 years of exploration of the Indian subcontinent to collect my ground evidences. I have written few books, especially because there are territories about which our idea is very gray. We do not really know about some areas, whereas some other part of India is very well explored. Now, I have written a book about Northeast India, Ladakh, pre-Portuguese Goa, Andamans, Nicobars. You will find at the end all are important. And unfortunately, we have very vague idea about these regions. So I concentrated in documenting what I have seen in these places and published books accordingly. It appears that the Indian origin people had traveled from India to the Mediterranean region, Egypt and Greece, about 10,000 years ago. A period and near the way, very specifically, Mr. Vedvir Arya has given you the dates. In my case, I'm trying to keep it, I'm trying to give you a rough idea that it is not necessarily 10,000 means sacrosanct 10,000, it is around that period, and we traveled with our language and culture. Anything, can you hear me? Now, what happened, that is the onward migration part. And at a later date, they returned for various reasons, initially by land route and then by sea route. This I am referring in my book as the reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities. And this Indo-Aryan concept of Indo-Aryan migration is only a part of this reverse migration. Now, we have to consider from a much earlier period who came from, we are anatomical modern human or Homo sapien. We have to go back where from we came. This anatomical modern human migrated from Africa several times, but the last time when they came out of Africa is known as out of Africa, which took place roughly 65,000 years ago. And they traveled along the coastal region, and this is known as Great Coastal Migration. They passed through India, and eventually they managed to reach almost to Australia. Now, India served as the intermediate host. When they came here, they continuously lived in India. So we have to take all these ground evidences into consideration. There are evidences to establish that India continuously, I mean, this anatomical modern human continuously lived in India, and this has happened nowhere in the world. But we are not projecting this, or we are not taking all these evidences into consideration when we are arranging our pre-recorded period. And unless we arrange the pre-recorded period to some extent, as far as possible, we will never understand various migrations which has taken place from this side to that side and from that side to this side. Now, again, it took me 20 years to collect ground evidences, to understand the process, and to arrange the sequence of events. That is very important. You have to understand what happened, why these are evidences, a particular evidence, what does it mean? It is of which period? Now, again, I'll go back that we are trying to establish the exact date of Ramayana, exact date of Mahabharata. We have to understand that these are all effects of onward and reverse migration. Everything has to be taken, considered in tandem in the narrative. Now, in this book, I am trying to introduce several new concepts. I don't know. I personally consider that we will not be able to understand the pre-recorded past of India unless we start thinking about all these new concepts, because we have never considered all these. I will show you why we have to. The ground evidences compel us. The ground evidences compels us to consider about these things. Otherwise, you will never be able to arrange how the people. Let us say we are all aware that Jarawange Sentinelese and Great Andamanis live in Andaman, but nobody is giving a thought about it. How did they reach there? They didn't travel by spice jet like we are doing. And they traveled, one particular group, Jarawange Sentinelese, one particular group traveled there 40,000 years ago. How did they go there? They walked into Andaman archipelago. Unless these are ground evidences, we are trying to keep our eyes closed. I don't know, nobody has explained that, so I need not think about that. When you think about this, then you have to think about a sequence of events. How could they reach? How and when did this land bridge formed when they walked into it? Then comes where from that land bridge went? What happened to that when that land bridge submerged? Because today there is Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal becomes a land. All these things, it is a sequence of events we have to start thinking, which we have never done it in the past. That's what I think. Now, that is my subject. You have to consider the ground evidences, what we have. We need not blindly follow what the Westerners think about India. Now, these are the concepts that the rising and lowering of seawater level during glacial and interglacial period and formation of the land bridge to the Andaman archipelago. Then comes the question that formation of the Bengal glacial coastal shelf, then submersion of Bengal glacial coastal shelf displacing the fraternities settled there. Significance of animal symbols. We see animal symbols all over, but again, we leave it ki kisi ko pata nahi hai, so don't think about it. It is possible to arrange the meaning of, this is a language, and this is a global language. You see animal symbols all over the world. So for how long we'll keep quiet ki we don't understand that, so let us not discuss about that. Then again comes if we have traveled from place A to place B, which route did we take? Do we have enough evidence to establish that route? From my side, we have to definitely concentrate on trans-Himalayan migration. I had to make lot of trips to Nepal, Bhutan, apart from Indian part of the Indian subcontinent. In fact, I explored upper Indus Valley so much that I had to write a book on Ladakh. Because I have to follow every valley, every river, how it is coming, and what are the evidence. We keep calling a particular fraternity there Aryan village. Are bhai, ye kahan se aaya? Who are these people? How did they land there? So all these things kept on bothering me, and I explored almost every Himalayan valley personally, quite often trekking, to collect ground evidences. When we are going to present this at Harvard or Yale, we have to give them evidence. This is what I have seen. See this. I'm talking about this photograph, not that what I think. Here is the evidence, and my presentation is based on ground evidences. And then, of course, comes genetic evidences which they have generated. And then spread of matriarchal culture. This is a very, very interesting subject, that from India, the matriarchal culture spread all over the world. And that is why we find in the Egyptian civilization, Nat, Hathor, Isis at the very root of their civilization. Then comes in, even if we go to Greece, it is Athena, from where Athens derives its name. And from there, the European civilization is originating. So again, at the root of a European civilization, it is a matriarchal community which is establishing themselves. Today, in this small time of 45 minutes, I am not going to go into the details of what are the evidence to establish that matriarchal culture went there and again came back also. But I'm just trying to give you that is also a very important thing we must claim, that this matriarchal culture had traveled from India to the rest of the world. And we find this matriarchal culture at the root of almost every ancient civilization of the world. Then temporary and permanent settlement of, settlement zone of India. Again, this is a subject which I will not be able to cover in this 45 minutes. I have explained that in details in the book. And then finally, reverse migration by land and sea route. I have shown you two maps. I've given enough number of maps to clarify exactly what I mean. Exactly what I mean, exactly what is the route, exactly when it happened. And then it is possible to establish that two reverse migration fraternities actually returned, one from the Red Sea region. Let us say we call that they came from Egypt, but they actually included people from Mediterranean region. Why did I go to Jordan and Israel to find out that what are the evidences they have there which clearly establishes that these were Indian origin people? He has mentioned about Gobekli Tepe, about Katal Hayuk, and this time I went to Jericho. There's in Israel. In fact, I got an opportunity to deliver a lecture like this, in fact, double that time at Tel Aviv Bar-Ilan University. And it was very well taken. I mean, we have to give them, these are there in ground in India. You may not know. Here is the documentation through my books. I am hereby documenting and now we're giving it in your library. Otherwise, what you are doing is you are thinking from your libraries, whatever you have in the library material, whereas a lot of Indian evidences are not there available to them in the library material. Now, what we do is, we have a tendency to think from their point of view. The Indians are, actually India is a melting pot, and people from different directions came to India, and that is Indians. That is, Indo-Aryan invasion is a concept like that. Indo-European speakers, as he mentioned, and then Austroasiatics, Tibeto-Burman, as if all had come from different region and they have made Indian population. Whereas my line of thinking is exactly the opposite. My think says that anatomical modern humans reached India 65,000 years ago, and since then they continuously lived, and periodically they have traveled to different places and populated those regions, whom you see today in Eurasia. Apart from Africa, we are not dealing, because Africa always had the oldest population. Whom you see in Eurasia are actually people who has traveled from they are Indian origin people, and they have traveled following the last glacial period, when our land submerged, coastal land submerged. We will try to come to that a little later. Because of my short time, what I'll do is, I'll show you few very small clippings or videos covering every important subject, excepting patriarchal, because that does not directly come under onward and reverse migration, so I had to restrict those, my timing into it. And these videos are, one is introduction, that when you go into the internet and here you will find that these are like an anatomical modern human arriving in India 65,000 years ago. Then again, as I mentioned, significance of animal symbol is a very important thing which we are completely missing. Importance of east coast of India, I'll show you why that is important. And spread of Indian fraternities, different routes they took, reverse migration by land route and reverse migration by sea route. Now, it took me it is difficult to convincingly establish the origin of modern civilization in India unless we manage to establish that recent genetic data also favors the hypothesis that Indian origin people traveled to the Mediterranean coast, Egypt and Greece. Now the point is, in the last 10-15 years, lot of genetic data has been generated by the Western people. It is the Western world which has generated this genetic data. They have published, they have compiled, but unfortunately nobody is discussing them. They are possibly not interested because these newly generated genetic data are not in their favor. When are we going to claim, let us discuss about these newer genetic data and settle the issue? Then if we have to think the migration from the opposite end, let us accept that, because the genetic data are in favor of that. Now I'll show you a video.
And Kumpuhar suggests that this civilization is at least 10,000 years old. It is also possible that the Indian civilization played the role of a mother in the origin of other ancient civilizations. Evidences suggest that the Indian origin fraternities had traveled to distant lands long ago to establish other ancient civilizations. At a later date, a large number of them returned to India for various reasons. This reverse migration phenomena is popularly known as Indo-Aryan migration. In fact, reverse migration of Indian origin fraternities resulted in the collapse of all other ancient civilizations of the world almost at the same time. As such, mysteriously, we do not find any reason for the collapse of other ancient civilizations. On the other hand, Indian civilization not only continues, but they also constructed several archaeological marvels which are comparable to the best archaeological monuments of the world. Excellent skill in stone cutting and creating stone sculptures remains at the center of such constructions. It is possible to establish the above view when we arrange the genetic, archaeological, linguistic and cultural evidences in a meticulous manner. I intend to initiate a discussion in that direction with available ground evidences and analysis of available scientific data. My first endeavor is to establish that the Egyptian civilization was developed by Indian origin fraternities. At this juncture, we have to consider that AMH, or anatomically modern humans, scientifically known as Homo sapiens, originated in Africa about 2 lakh years ago. They arrived in India about 65,000 years ago following their out of Africa move. They possibly followed a southern route known as the Great Coastal Migration. Though there are many theories regarding the early migration of AMH, this is the most accepted view. In all probability, AMH reached Andamans from the Bengal-Myanmar coast. They continued their eastward journey farther all the way to Australia. It is possible that India served as the intermediate host of AMH and they continuously lived there for 65,000 years. They reached Europe much later, about 45 to 50,000 years ago, possibly from India during an interglacial period. AMH could survive in India during both the glacial and interglacial periods because of availability of favorable terrains. During the glacial period, they lived south of the Vindhya Parvat, marked as green territory in the map in eastern, central and southern India. While during the interglacial period, they also spread to northern and western India, marked as blue territory large number of dark complexion tribes in India suggests the continuous survival of AMH there, whereas absence of any such human diversity in Europe and rest of Asia suggests the spread of anatomical modern humans in these regions only during the interglacial period. Though AMH reached Europe and Northern Asia during every interglacial period, they could not survive there during the severe weather of glacial maximum and became extinct. We have evidences of extinction of Neanderthals in Europe and Denisovans in Siberia 40,000 years ago during a previous glacial maximum. It is possible that Indian origin people spread to other regions of Asia and Europe during the interglacial period was the trans-Himalayan migration was possible. The trans-Himalayan migration path bifurcated from Mount Kailash. One route descended from Kailash and followed the Makran coast to reach the Horn of Africa and Nile Delta, where the Egyptian civilization developed. Both the Indus Valley civilization and Sumerian civilization emerged on this route, while the other route from Mount Kailash went through Asia Minor, now Turkey, to Europe. The Mesopotamian civilization emerged on this route. Presently, the pre-recorded period is arranged on the basis of various subjects like anthropology, archaeology, ancient texts including religious texts, and mythology, spread of languages, culture and social customs, and so on. Very recently, genetics has emerged as a useful and very effective subject for the purpose. As the events related to the pre-recorded period in Europe are few, it is generally discussed under two broad heads: Paleolithic period and Neolithic period. However, as AMS lived in India continuously for 65,000 years, while arranging the pre-recorded period of India, in addition to the above subjects, we need to consider other subjects as well. These newer subjects in relation to India need to be identified and appreciated. I intend to discuss the pre-recorded period of India under the following heads: origin of several fraternities who identified themselves with various animal symbols, events related to glacial and interglacial periods, a probable period of matriarchal culture, the spread of Indian origin fraternities to distant lands, various possible migration routes and trans-Himalayan migration, reverse migration of Indian origin fraternities from Egypt and Europe. It is possible to establish the evidences of origin of newer AMH fraternities on the eastern coast of India. It is also possible to establish the migration paths of the Indian origin fraternities to distant lands. A number of animal images are seen in every archaeological structure in India and in all the ancient civilizations of the world. It is unlikely that they serve a decorative purpose only. In all probability, animal symbols like naga, tiger, lion, elephant, fish, turtle, primate, each represented a human fraternity in the ancient period. When two such fraternities united to form a fusion fraternity, it was represented by a fusion animal image. These fusion animal images are not understood and are generally described as mythical images because no such animal exists in nature. A winged lion image, possibly representing an ethnic fusion of lion and avian fraternities, is seen in India, Greece and Egypt. It establishes its widespread distribution in three ancient civilizations of the world. This symbol was created in Greece and Egypt 2,000 to 5,000 years ago, which has remained in archaeological structures as images frozen in time. However, in India, such images were created till very recently. Another fusion animal image seen in the Narmer palette of Egypt has the face of a tiger, neck of a serpent or naga, and body of a primate. Naga, Bag and primate were the three early Indian origin fraternities which migrated to distant lands. As the Narmer palette image signifies the union of Upper and Lower Egypt by Narmer, the first king of Egypt, this image which suggests that it was established by an union of 3 Indian origin fraternities. Another interesting composite animal image in Majuli Island, Assam, shows features of the elephant, lion, avian and horse swallowing a fish. These possibly depict formation of an allied force to destroy the ruler of a territory represented by the fish. Several newer AMH fraternities originated in India and they adopted various animal images as their ethnic symbols. The coastal dweller fraternities identified themselves with the Naga, fish, turtle and goose symbols, while the forest dwellers or the hunter-gatherers identified themselves with the Naga, Bagh, primate, elephant and owl symbols. It is possible to arrange the animal symbols meaningfully, establishing their interpersonal relationships. It appears that these animal symbols served as vahus of the Indian deities belonging to various fraternities. In the Egyptian civilization, however, deities are seen with their heads replaced by the head of the animal to which fraternity the deity belonged. Over a period, Naga-descended fraternities adopted the fish and avian symbols. Indian origin fraternities often adopted newer animal symbols to represent a transformed fraternity in a distant land. The tiger fraternity adopted the lion image and thus we find both the tiger and lion as the vahus of Durga. I have drawn a flow chart to arrange the ancestry of various Indian origin fraternities and their respective descendants. Over a period of time, descendants of the fish fraternity adopted the ram and horse symbols. Interestingly, the horse fraternity was known as Osho fraternity, and as they spread over many regions, the continent acquired the name Asia. As the Osho fraternity of 2 territories joined together during the reverse migration, they were known as Oshinis or Oshidoi, meaning 2 horses. 2 horses forming a twin brother team is common in the iconography of many regions of Eurasia, including India. Finally, it is possible that during the matriarchal period, the fraternity adopted the feminine images as their ethnic identity, like the cow. As they adopted the patriarchal culture, they adopted the bull as their ethnic symbol. Both the cow and the bull are considered as sacred animals in India. Bull is also the Vahun of Shiva. A complex Vahun of goddess Ganga provided clues regarding the composition of various fraternities which migrated along the river during the matriarchal period. Image of Lamassu suggested that in the Assyrian Empire, the king was dependent on the bull and the avian fraternities. Similarly, a complex sculpture in Sri Lanka suggested that Oshur fraternity emerged from the Naga and Turtle fraternity, and they worshipped Shiva, the deity of the bull fraternity, and Saraswati, the deity of the avian fraternity. It took me many years of analysis and collection of photographs from not only all over Indian subcontinent, but also foreign territories like Egypt to understand and arrange the sequence of the process. It took me some time to understand the complexity of fusion fraternities. I had to scratch my head for years to understand the phases of matriarchal and patriarchal period and the subsequent alteration of the animal symbols. I feel that understanding the hierarchy of the animal symbols would help arrange the migration path of various early human fraternities all over the world. Several ethnic fraternities adopted various animal symbols, and as they migrated from the east coast, they spread Indian languages to those distant lands. What was so special about the east coast of India, where all these ethnic fraternities developed? Is it possible that newer language fraternities like R1 alpha and R1 bravo haplogroups in Y chromosome originated in this region? Unless we are able to establish the unique nature of the Bengal-Myanmar coast to justify the origin of these newer genetic identities, the discussion regarding migration of various ethnic fraternities from the East Coast becomes baseless, and also the spread of Indian languages. Interestingly, R1 alpha haplogroup in Y chromosome genetic identity is found in the entire Indo-European language-speaking territory, extending from Eastern India to Western Europe. Thus, this entire territory is clearly linguistically and genetically continuous. Europe also has high percentage of R1 Bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome genetic identity. This genetic identity is found in various other regions of Asia, including India and Mesopotamia, and also in the Afro-Asian speaking Central Africa. Interestingly, an isolated pocket of this genetic identity is found on the east coast of India, which has not received the required attention so far. These isolated pockets need to be included while charting the early migration path of the fraternity. In fact, these isolated pockets could be their oldest settlements. Presently, it is believed that R1 alpha and R1 Bravo haplogroups in Y chromosome both originated in Eastern Europe near the European steppe and Anatolia region. However, many scholars consider that the origin of R1 alpha in South Asia cannot be ruled out. In fact, Anderlecht, who conducted a widespread genetic analysis of the Indo-European speaking territory, marked a region near Gujarat as having the oldest R1 alpha and several Himalayan pockets where the concentration of R1 alpha is extremely high. This itself clashes with the hypothesis of European steppe as the site of origin of R1 alpha. A number of Aboriginal tribes lived in the Andaman archipelago. However, there is very little discussion about who were these people, when and how did they reach there. The only possible explanation is that they walked into the Andaman archipelago from the Bengal-Myanmar coast when a land bridge formed. During the glacial maximum, the sea level subsides by about 400 feet or 130 meters, and the Bengal coastline recedes, connecting Andamans with the mainland. During glacial period, for several thousand years, a huge coastal landmass surfaces between the Bengal and Myanmar coast, which is referred to as the Bengal Glacial Coastal Shelf in this book. At this time, the population of two distinct genetic territories, the east coast of India and Southeast Asia, intermix. And this genetic union produces newer genetic identities like R1 alpha and R1 Bravo haplogroups in Y chromosome. As the seawater gradually rises during the interglacial period, this coastal landmass submerges, displacing the settled population. They settle on the Bengal coast and adopted various animal symbols as their ethnic identity. To begin with, they were bare-bodied and were known as Nanga, who adopted the Naga or serpent as their ethnic symbol. It is possible that their mother goddess was Kali, who is also depicted bare-bodied. These early fraternities eventually migrated following the trans-Himalayan migration routes pivoting Mount Kailash. The Indus Valley civilization emerged on this route. They continued their journey and established the Egyptian and Greek civilizations. It is extremely crucial to establish the site of origin of R1 alpha and R1 Bravo haplogroups in Y chromosome on the east coast of India 10,000 years ago, because that will provide us the direction of the migration of the post-glacial period AMH fraternities and also the reason for the spread of Indian language and culture. About 10,000 years ago, R1 Bravo haplogroup in Y chromosome migrated to Africa, establishing the Egyptian civilization and spreading Pali language in the Mediterranean region. Similarly, about 5,800 years ago, R1 alpha haplogroup in Y chromosome migrated to Eastern Europe along with the spoken Sanskrit language. It is interesting to note that surnames like Nag, Bag or Baghela, Hathi, Shingho or Singh, and Pakhi are still common in India, especially in Bengal. Similarly, we find fraternities like Mech and Koch in North Bengal. In all probability, Mech originated from Mach or Machi, meaning fish, and they belong to the fish fraternity. Similarly, Koch possibly originated from the word Kocho or Kachwa, meaning turtle. There are territories in Assam and Bengal like Kachar, Koch Bihar, Koch Hajo and Kushkia suggesting their settlements. It is most likely that these early human fraternities named their settlements after the animal symbols which represented their ethnic fraternities. As these fraternities migrated from the east coast of India, their migration path can be arranged. The migration path of Bagh fraternity can be traced from Bagdogra in North Bengal, ascending along Bagmati river and reaching Baglum Kali temple in Nepal, and finally Baghdad in Mesopotamia across Mount Kailash. A number of localities named after Bagh in Afghanistan like Baglam, Bagram and so on. Baghdad is located on river Tigris, and the word Tigris originated from the word tiger or tigre. In many Eastern Indian languages, Bagh means tiger. Thus, both the city and the adjacent river were named after the same animal species, which possibly represented a human fraternity. Is it just a coincidence? Interestingly, it is only in India that tiger is known as Bagh. Similarly, it is possible to trace the migration path of the fish fraternity. Fish is the Vahan of Ganga, suggesting the onward migration of the fish fraternity from Ganga Hridi along river Ganga from the east coast of India. We have Mechi Nodi and Mechi Kali in Nepal. We find territories like Mesopotamia, Masa of Turkey, Macedonia, and finally the Mycenaean civilization of ancient Greece. Koch or turtle fraternity migration path can be established from eastern India along river Jamuna of Bangladesh to reach Kailash. Incidentally, turtle is the Vahan of river Jamuna, suggesting its migration along the river. As one descends along Indus from Kailash, one reaches Kutch of Gujarat and Kutchi district of Balochistan. Following the Persian Gulf, one reaches the territory of Kassites in Mesopotamia, and finally the Koch fraternity emerges as Kushites in the Horn of Africa. It is possible that the Caspian Sea and Caucasus Mountains were so named as they were Koch fraternity settlements. Hathi is one of the most successful Indian origin fraternities which spread all over the world. They named their settlements Hathi and Hattusa in Turkey. Their king was Hattusili, and their kingdom was known as Hittite Empire. Their settlement along the Mediterranean coast was named Gojo, now famous as the Gaza Strip, and their settlement in Lower Egypt was named Giza, also from Gojo. As the Gojo fraternity was matriarchal in nature, their settlement in Afghanistan was known as Gojani. The Ganga Sagar Mela is held on Makar Sankranti Day on the east coast of India. Makar, or the elephant-headed fish, is the Vahan of Ganga, suggesting migration of this fusion fraternity along river Ganga. The Makran coast derived its name from the Makar fraternity settlement who takes care of the mohor or crocodile. In the Horn of Africa, they were known as Makuria language speakers, and their kingdom was known as the Makuria kingdom. Interestingly, many Nubian families of Egypt keep crocodile as a pet and draw crocodile in front of their house. These families possibly belong to the Makar fraternity. Pali language spread from India to the Mediterranean coast, Egypt and Greece. Their settlement was known as Palistan, now Palestine. On the other hand, spoken Sanskrit language spread to Anatolia and Europe. The same Indian origin fraternity settlements were known by different names in these two territories. The elephant fraternity settlement was known as Hathi in Turkey and as Gojo or Giza in the Mediterranean coast and Egypt. Similarly, fish settlements were known as Mesopotamia, Masa, Motsu, Macedonia and Mycenaean civilization in Europe, and they were known as the Minoan fraternity in Egypt, who established the Minoan civilization in ancient Greece. Indian languages probably remained popular for several thousand years on the Mediterranean coast and around. Thus, when new fraternities like Shingo and Osho formed there after several thousand years, they had Indian names. Osho means horse, Shingo means lion in eastern India like in Bengal. I am told it is known as Simha in Sanskrit. It thus appears that Indian origin languages spread to distant lands as people settled there. Over a period, these languages became global. It seems that Indian origin people with their languages possibly established other ancient civilizations. Our humble mission is to investigate the ground evidences and scientific data in order to review our history and learn about it from an entirely new perspective. In the second half of my book, I have discussed the evidences of reverse migration of the Indian origin fraternities from Egypt by different routes and in different periods. It is apparent that the land route migration took place along the Uttarapur and the Indus Valley civilization. In fact, the matriarchal period of the Indus Valley civilization, that is from 2600 BC to 1900 BC, perfectly coincides with the period of the land route reverse migration from Egypt. As such, IVC or Indus Valley civilization was located on the land route from India to Egypt. We find the emergence of the reverse migration animal symbols like the horse, boar, lion and peacock along the entire stretch of the Uttarapur. These animal symbols are found all over the subcontinent, but their emergence in the Indian Himalayas, Nepal, Bhutan, Tibetan Plateau and Northeast India are striking, as these species are mostly not found there. These regions are connected with Egypt and Europe through the Uttarapur. A number of ground evidences identify the migration paths along which both the onward and reverse migration had taken place. I have seen two friends sharing the ownership of a shop in Pokhara, Nepal. One gentleman was short with brachycephalic features, which is possibly a typical feature of the indigenous Indians. In this case, the face is roundish with more than 80% of the vertical height of the face, while his friend was not only tall but also had an oligocephalic face, with width of the face less than 75% of the height. This is a typical feature of some parts of Europe. I have also seen Kali in the Kamala Shagar temple of Tripura draped in a white sari, suggesting her reverse migration nature. A dramatic change occurred in the reverse migration path when a direct sea route between the Red Sea ports and the west coast of India was established around 1500 BC. This new land route was possibly referred to as Dakhinapur, which joined Uttarapur near Mount Kailash. The Shodashu Mahajanapadas emerged along these two highways, which were exclusively recorded in the Jain and Buddhist texts written in Pali. It suggested that these were settlements of the Pali speakers. Their absence in Sanskrit records exposes a rivalry between the Pali and Sanskrit speakers. In all probability, reverse migration fraternities from Europe were Sanskrit speakers, and the reverse migration fraternities from Egypt were Pali and Prakrit speakers. At this juncture, as the reverse migration fraternities from Egypt came by ship directly to the west coast of India, nobody traveled along the old land route via the Indus Valley civilization, resulting in a silent collapse. As such, we could not find any cause for the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization. As 16 Mahajanapadas emerged in northern India, it gave an impression that Indus Valley civilization population had shifted to the Gangetic Plains. Over a period, the sea route from Red Sea got extended to the Bay of Bengal, as the reverse migration fraternities from Egypt were keen to reach the matriarchal territories of Ganga Hridi. The Prakrit-speaking fraternities returned back to Bengal at this stage. The Egyptian deities Hathor and Isis, created on the front facade of the Cairo Museum, are associated with lotuses, much like Lakshmi and Saraswati of the Indian pantheon. These images have striking...
Just a minute. ये चले जाइए नीचे. We are already late, so I had no choice but to close it. Now, there's only one small thing, that is, what should we do now? You know, what we have understood, or we have the evidences to establish what I have said. But how do we establish that globally? First is we have to draw their attention to the Andaman archipelago. Look, these people are pre-glacial period population. Jarawanga Sentinelese belong to a particular group and Great Andaman is belong to. Unfortunately, we don't discuss all this in our academic curriculum, so they remain undiscussed in our year, but these are ground evidences. Then we have to draw their attention the migration path, that is, how did they reach there? Automatically, the question of Bengal glacial coastal shelf will come. They have not flown there. They have walked into it. The moment you think about Bengal glacier, then comes that submersion of the Bengal glacial coast. That will give the reason for the migration. You know, if the people were very well settled for 10,000 years on the Bengal glacial coastal shelf, why should they move? They moved because their land submerged. And they had no control over that. Then comes the reason, why did they move? And then the most important thing, this Bengal glacial coastal shelf, probably, all the evidences now, the recently generated genetic data suggests that the R1 alpha and R1 bravo, these are the two principal post-glacial period genetic data possibly originated there. And that is very important because that will give the idea that once we manage to establish that, then the world civilization would belong to the Indian origin people. That because the majority or almost all the refined civilizations of the world, they have R1 alpha and R1 bravo genetic identity. And then the spread I have already mentioned quickly. Then there are certain things which we can make out that we had the original authentic knowledge, like stone cutting. Now we see all over the archaeological world that there are huge stone cut structures which includes pyramid and sphinx and all these things. We had the knowledge of stone cutting. That is why our temples, even today, till some time back, the construct, like Kailash temple of Ellora and all the Indian temples, they have a special skill of stone cutting and transporting of huge stone blocks are required for constructing those temples. We had the skill of terracotta. We had the skill of animal symbol. We have seen that various deities are given different complexion. Our deities still have this different complexion. We are following that. And finally, reverse migration, I have mentioned that we are missing one particular thing, that is Ganga Hridi. If you click in your mobile, you will find Ganga Hridi is very well recorded in Greek, Roman, and even in Ptolemy's map. Why our history is not starting from there? These are Greek records, Roman records. The British did a very smart thing. Once we establish this migration path, automatically our knowledge about astronomy, astrology, mathematics, philosophy, medicine, metallurgy will get established. We suspect this knowledge transfer from India to the West, but failed to establish them convincingly. The British did a very smart thing. They eliminated each of these issues from Indian syllabus. Unfortunately, we are still following the British syllabus in many subjects. Thus, these issues remain out of our syllabus. So nowhere to discuss this, and nobody has time to discuss this because this does not belong to their syllabus. I do not have time to elaborate on each point, but have mentioned that in my book. The British have managed to hide and suppress all our strengths quite successfully. Now that we are a free nation and not bound by a colonial mindset, I can expect and sincerely hope that we come forward to demonstrate our strengths and our contributions in shaping the history of the world. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.